Lena had always lived a quiet life, the kind of life that never drew much attention. She worked at a small corner shop where people came in mostly for bread, a tea, and a few minutes of complaining about the heat or the traffic. She stood behind the counter with a soft smile, ringing up items and wishing each person a good day. Most customers barely noticed her. A few remembered her name, but almost nobody knew anything real about her. Most days were the same. She would finish her shift, walk home through the familiar streets, and step into the small apartment she shared with her mother. Her mother usually sat near the window, wrapped in a blanket even when it was warm, sipping tea and watching the world pass by from 4 floors above the street. Her health had been fragile for years, and Lena took care of her without ever complaining. It was just life. It was just what you did for someone you loved. But late at night, when her mother slept and the world finally grew quiet, Lena would sit in the corner of the living room with an old keyboard she borrowed from a neighbor who no longer needed it. The keyboard was missing one key, and there was a small crack on the side, but it still worked. Lena didn't mind its flaws. In some strange way, she felt they understood each other. Music had been her dream long before life became heavy. When she was young, her father would take her to community events where local singers performed. She remembered standing beside him, holding his hand, watching the singers pour their hearts into their songs. Her father always whispered the same words to her: "You have a voice too. Don't hide it." But life changed too quickly. Her father passed unexpectedly, leaving a quiet sadness in their home that never fully left. Her mother grew weaker. Bills grew heavier. Dreams grew smaller. The world didn't wait for her to catch up, so music became something she kept for herself, a secret space where she could breathe. She didn't sing in public. She didn't post videos online. She didn't join choirs or classes. She just sang in the dark rooms of her home where no one judged her, where her voice could rise and fall without fear. One afternoon at work, a few regular customers were chatting near the counter. They talked about a talent night happening at the community hall. It wasn't a big event, mostly local performers, dancers, singers, comedians, but people still enjoyed it. The hall filled up every year because families came to support their children or neighbors. It was more about fun than competition, but something about the way they talked about it caught Lena's attention. She found herself pausing mid-step, listening as one of them laughed and said, "Anyone can join. They don't even check skill. You just sign up, pay a small fee, and they put your name on the list." Anyone can join. That sentence stayed with her. Anyone, even someone like her. On her walk home that day, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Her steps felt slower, heavier with thoughts she didn't know how to organize. When she reached her building, she stood outside for a few minutes, staring at the sky as if it could give her answers. Could she really do something like that? Stand on a stage? Sing in front of people? Let strangers hear the voice she had only ever shared with her walls? The idea felt impossible, but also strangely alive. Inside the apartment, her mother was resting. Lena quietly set her things down and sat beside her, brushing her hair away from her face. After a moment of silence, her mother opened her eyes and smiled weakly. "You look thoughtful," she whispered. Lena hesitated. "There's a talent show next week." Her mother raised her eyebrows. "And you're thinking of going?" Lena swallowed. "Not to watch too. Perform." Her mother didn't laugh. She didn't look surprised. Instead, a gentle warmth filled her tired eyes. "You should," she said. "You've hidden long enough." That night, Lena filled out the online form, her hand shaking slightly as she typed her name into the participant list. When she hit submit, her heart raced so fast she had to sit back for a moment. It felt unreal. It felt like she had stepped into a different version of herself. One she wasn't sure she was ready for. The next day, after her shift, she walked to the community hall for rehearsal. The building was old, but lively with posters of previous talent nights taped to the walls. Some showed smiling children in bright costumes, others showed performers caught mid-dance or mid-laugh. The air smelled like dust, wood polish, and excitement. A group of performers stood near the entrance, talking loudly. Some wore glittery outfits. Others carried instruments in shiny cases. A few teenagers practiced dance moves in the corner. laughing as they tripped over each other. When Lena walked in, the noise didn't stop, but she could feel eyes turning toward her. Some looked curious. Others looked amused. She wore simple clothes, plain jeans, a faded shirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. She didn't look like someone who belonged on a stage. The host, a man with a clipboard, glanced her way and frowned slightly. "Are you here to rehearse?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm performing." He looked her up and down as if trying to understand how her quiet presence fit into the energy around him. "All right," he said slowly. "Name." She told him, and he checked his list. "Okay, you're on the schedule. Just wait over there." He pointed to a corner near a group of chairs. As she took a seat, she heard whispers. Not loud enough to be clear, but loud enough to sting. Is she serious? She looks terrified. Maybe she signed up by mistake. Someone laughed softly. Lena felt her chest tighten, but she kept her eyes down and her hands folded. She reminded herself why she was there. Not for them. Not for applause. She was there because she had decided she deserved one chance to step out of the shadows. Rehearsals moved quickly. Performers took turns going up on the small wooden stage. Some sang loudly with too much confidence. Others danced with practiced steps. A girl played a violin piece so gracefully that even the teenagers stopped goofing around to listen. Finally, the host called Lena's name. Her stomach twisted. Her hands felt cold. She stood slowly and walked toward the stage. A few people exchanged amused looks. Someone whispered, "This should be interesting." With a smirk, when she climbed the small steps, she felt every eye on her. The lights weren't bright yet. They saved them for the actual show, but even in the dimness, she felt exposed. "Do you have a track?" the host asked. She nodded and handed him a small USB. He plugged it in, and the opening notes of her song played softly through the speakers. She stepped toward the microphone, but before she even touched it, she heard a small chuckle from the seats. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be heard by her, but she heard it anyway. Her breath caught. Her heart thumped painfully. For a moment, she considered stepping back down, grabbing her USB, and leaving the hall forever. But then she remembered her mother's face, the quiet pride in her tired eyes. She remembered her father's words, "You have a voice too." She closed her eyes. In that small moment, she wasn't standing on a stage surrounded by strangers. She was in her living room late at night, the world asleep, her keyboard humming beside her. She took a long, shaky breath and opened her eyes. The first notes she sang came out soft, trembling. She knew the room wasn't impressed. She could almost feel their impatience, but she didn't stop. She didn't let the doubt win. She kept singing, letting each word carry the weight of every quiet moment she had lived, every time she had been overlooked, every dream she had pushed down just to survive. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't hiding. She was beginning. Before she realized it, the song ended. The room was silent, not the loud, shocked silence of admiration, but the dull silence of people unsure of what to say. "Okay," the host said. "That's fine for now. You'll go on in the middle of the program?" Lena nodded, stepped down, and returned to her seat. Her legs felt weak. The whispers had stopped. She wasn't sure if that was a good sign. As she gathered her things to leave, one of the performers, a tall boy with a guitar, looked at her with pity. Not kindness. Pity. "Hey," he said softly, "don't worry too much about tomorrow. Not everyone is made for the stage." Lena swallowed the hurt and forced a small smile. "Maybe not," she said. "But I'm still going to try." He didn't reply. He just smiled awkwardly and walked away. When Lena stepped outside, sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange and pink shades. She stood there for a moment, her breath visible in the cool air. She felt small, but she also felt something else, a tiny spark deep inside her. Refusing to go out, she walked home slowly, thinking about every moment of the rehearsal. The laughter, the whispers, the doubtful glances. They hurt. She couldn't lie about that. They made her question herself in ways she thought she had overcome. But then she thought about her mother waiting at home. She thought about the old keyboard. She thought about the song she would sing again tomorrow, this time in front of a full audience. People might judge her. They might laugh. They might expect nothing from her, but that didn't mean she had nothing to give. When she reached her apartment, her mother greeted her with a hopeful look. "How did it go?" she asked. Lena hesitated, then smiled gently. "It was okay," she said. "I was nervous, but I did it." Her mother took her hand. "You're stronger than you think." Later that night, Lena sat in the dim glow of the living room lamp. She placed her fingers on the cracked keyboard and closed her eyes. She didn't practice the whole song. She just played a few soft notes, letting them fill the room. Tomorrow would be hard, but tomorrow could also be beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, Lena allowed herself to hope. Lena woke up earlier than usual the next morning, even though she had barely slept. Her mind had replayed the rehearsal again and again through the night. The whispers, the awkward stares, the pity in that boy's eyes. Every small moment stayed with her like a weight she couldn't shake off. But there was something else too. Something that kept her from giving up. A quiet flame inside her that refused to die out, no matter how strong the doubts were. The morning light slipped through the thin curtains, painting gentle lines across the room. Her mother was still asleep, breathing softly. Lena stood for a moment and watched her. Her mother always believed in her more than she believed in herself. Maybe that was why she couldn't walk away from the talent show. Maybe she wanted just once to make her mother proud in a way that reached beyond their small apartment. She walked quietly to the kitchen and made tea, the familiar scent calming her nerves. As she waited for the water to boil, she looked at the small calendar hanging on the wall. Today was the day. The talent night? The night she had agreed to place herself in front of an entire audience full of strangers. Her stomach twisted at the thought. But she kept reminding herself that courage wasn't supposed to feel comfortable. When her mother woke up, Lena tried to hide her nervousness with a smile. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," her mother replied, stretching her thin arms. "Today's the big day," Lena nodded. "Yeah, it is." Her mother studied her carefully. "Are you scared?" Lena hesitated only a second before answering honestly. "Very." Her mother smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "Being scared just means you're doing something that matters." Those words stayed with her as she got ready for work. She wore the same simple clothes she always wore, but she brushed her hair with more care than usual. She didn't have fancy makeup or expensive outfits like the other performers from rehearsal, but she had her voice, and deep down, she hoped it would be enough. At the shop, she tried to focus on her tasks, stacking shelves, helping customers, sorting receipts, but her mind kept drifting to the stage. The lights, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Every time someone asked her a question, she answered a little slower than usual because she had to pull her thoughts. Back from the evening, one of the regular customers, an older woman who usually came in for bread, noticed Lena's faraway look. "You seem distracted today," the woman said kindly. "Everything all right?" Lena forced a small smile. "Just nervous about something later." "Ah." The woman nodded knowingly. "Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll do just fine. You have gentle eyes." People with gentle eyes always surprise others. Lena didn't know what that meant exactly, but it made her heart warm anyway. When her shift finally ended, she hurried home. She had a few hours before the talent night began, but the closer the time came, the more her nerves tightened. She ate a small meal with her mother, though eating felt difficult with the heavy knot in her stomach. "I'll be in the audience," her mother said. "Don't look for me. Just sing," Lena nodded. But a part of her felt comfort knowing her mother would be somewhere in the crowd. She wouldn't be completely alone, as the sky began turning darker. Lena put on her shoes and wrapped a light scarf around her shoulders. She took a deep breath before stepping out the door. Outside, the streets buzzed with life children playing, people heading home from work, shop signs glowing in the early evening. Everything looked normal, but for Lena, nothing felt normal. Every step she took toward the community hall felt like a step toward something huge, something she couldn't fully understand yet. The building came into view. bright lights spilling out from the entrance as people gathered, chatting and laughing. There were families with small children, teenagers dressed up in sparkling outfits, and older residents carrying snacks and clapping excitedly for friends. Lena hesitated at the entrance. She felt small again, the same way she felt during rehearsal. She wondered if she truly belonged there, among the confident performers and loud supporters. Inside, the hall was even more crowded. Performers rushed around, checking their costumes, warming up their voices, or rehearsing last-minute moves. Parents helped children fix their hair or adjust their clothes. Some dancers practiced in groups. The room felt alive and loud. When Lena walked in, a few familiar faces from rehearsal noticed her. Their expressions didn't change much. Some looked indifferent. Others gave a half smile that didn't reach their eyes. A couple whispered something to each other. But she didn't try to understand what they said. She checked in with the host, who barely looked at her before directing her to the backstage area. She followed his instructions quietly, trying not to bump into anyone in the crowded space. Backstage was a narrow hallway filled with performers waiting for their turn. The walls were covered with old posters of past events. Some people were stretching or humming. Others were scrolling through their phones. The air was thick with anticipation. Lena found an empty chair in the corner and sat down, her hands resting on her lap. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her heartbeat. Her throat felt dry, and she couldn't stop replaying the moment from rehearsal when someone laughed at her. What if I mess up? She whispered to herself. What if I shake too much? What if they laugh again? But then she took a deep breath. What if I don't? She whispered back to herself. What if this time is different? Time passed slowly. Her nerves came in waves, sometimes sharp and strong, sometimes gentle. Performers went on stage one by one. She could hear muffled applause through the curtain each time someone finished. Some cheers were loud. Others were polite and quick. A little girl in a bright yellow dress sat next to her at one point. She smiled at Lena with big, excited eyes. Are you singing too? She asked. Lena nodded. Yes. Are you dancing? The girl giggled proudly. My mom said I should smile, even if I'm scared. Lena felt a small laugh escape her lips. Your mom is right. The girl nodded confidently. You should smile too. Then she skipped away when someone called her name. Those simple words, spoken by a child with no judgment in her eyes, brought Lena a small sense of comfort. Finally, after what felt like hours, the host walked backstage with his clipboard. He read out the next performers, his voice loud and fast. Next up, guitar solo. After that, we have comedy. Then we have Lena. Her breath stopped for a moment. She felt like the floor had shifted. She closed her eyes again, counting slowly in her mind. It's okay, she told herself. Just breathe. When the guitar solo started on stage, she could hear the strong notes through the walls. The crowd was cheering loudly. Then the comedy act followed, laughter rolling through the hall in waves. Then it was quiet. Lena, you're up, the host said. Her knees felt weak, but she stood. She walked toward the curtain while holding the small USB tightly in her hand. Her heart raced so fast she could feel it in her throat. The host took the USB from her and plugged it into the system. The lights dimmed slightly in the hall. She could hear live murmurs from the audience as she stepped onto the stage. The bright lights hit her face, blinding her for a moment. The stage felt much bigger than it looked during rehearsal. Her hands trembled, and she could feel hundreds of eyes examining her. A whisper floated from somewhere in the crowd. It's that girl from yesterday, another voice, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the air. She looks even more nervous tonight. Someone laughed softly. Her throat tightened. Her instinct told her to run, but then she saw something: her mother, sitting near the back row, looking at her with the softest, warmest expression. She didn't look worried. She didn't look disappointed. She just looked proud. That was enough. Lena stepped closer to the microphone. Her breath trembled, but she didn't step back. The music began, soft and slow. Filling the hall, she closed her eyes. Everything around her faded, the whispers, the lights, the doubt, the pressure. All she could feel was the steady rhythm of the song and the familiar warmth it brought. She opened her mouth. The first note came out soft, barely above a whisper. But it was honest. It was real. It carried everything she felt, the fear, the hope, the quiet strength she didn't know she had. A few people in the audience sat up straighter. The whispers faded. She continued singing, her voice still gentle, but gaining steadiness with each word. The melody wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. In the middle of the second verse, she allowed herself to look up. The room was still. People were watching, not laughing, not judging, watching. She felt tears prick the back of her eyes. But she kept singing, letting every emotion rise through her voice. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't try to be perfect. She just tried to be true. By the time the song reached its highest point, something inside her broke free. For a moment, she wasn't the quiet cashier who barely spoke. She wasn't the girl people overlooked. She wasn't the nervous performer from rehearsal. She was someone who had a story to tell, and she told it with her voice. When the final note faded, the hall stayed silent for a long moment, a moment long enough for her heart to pound painfully, then a single clap, then another, then applause, soft but growing. Not a loud cheer. Not the kind of applause that shakes a room, but a warm, sincere applause that wrapped around her like a blanket. She stepped back from the microphone, her chest rising and falling quickly. She couldn't read every face, but she knew one thing for sure. She didn't fail, she didn't crumble. She stood on that stage and let herself be seen. And that alone made her stronger than she had ever been. Before, the applause was still, echoing in Lena's ears as she stepped off the stage. Her legs felt unsteady, like they didn't belong to her. Her hands trembled, but it wasn't the same kind of shaking she felt before she began singing. This time it wasn't fear. It was something else. Something warm and overwhelming. Like she had finally broken through a wall she had spent years standing behind. She walked backstage slowly, unsure how to carry herself after everything that had just happened. The hallway, once filled with rushing performers and loud voices, now felt strangely distant to her. She felt as if she were walking through a soft dream. A few performers she had seen earlier glanced at her as she passed. Their expressions were different now. Not playful. Not dismissive. Not amused. Something had shifted. One dancer, a girl with glitter in her hair, paused mid-conversation when Lena walked by. She blinked as if seeing her for the first time. "Hey," she said softly. "That was beautiful." Lena looked at her, surprised. "Thank you," she whispered. The dancer nodded, a bit shy now. "Really? You sang from your heart?" Others nearby murmured similar things, some too embarrassed to say them out loud, but their eyes gave them away. They weren't expecting her to be good. They weren't expecting her to move anyone. Lena could see it, and for the first time, she didn't shrink under their gaze. She found the same quiet corner where she had sat earlier. She lowered herself into the chair carefully, her heartbeat slowly settling back into a steady rhythm. She closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. She had done it. She had survived the whispers, the judgment, the fear. She had stepped onto the stage and given everything she had. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel proud while she sat there. Lost in her thoughts, she suddenly felt someone standing in front of her. She opened her eyes. It was the boy with the guitar, the same one from rehearsal who had looked at her with pity. He held his guitar strap loosely, as though unsure of what to do with his hands. "Hey," he said. She nodded politely. "Hi." He seemed uncomfortable, like he was rehearsing his words in his head before saying them. I wanted to say something." Lena waited quietly. "I was wrong," he said finally. "Yesterday, I thought you weren't ready. I thought you'd freeze up or run off the stage. But what you did out there, it was real. It wasn't perfect or fancy, but it was honest. People felt it." She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to people apologizing to her. She wasn't used to being seen like this. He scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "Sorry for doubting you." Lena gave him a small smile. "It's okay. I doubted myself too." He laughed softly at that, though there was no mockery in it. Well, you shouldn't anymore. Before either of them could say anything more, the host called him for his turn. He gave her a quick nod before rushing off. Lena leaned back in her chair. She felt the exhaustion finally settling into her body. The night had only just begun, but emotionally, she felt like she had lived an entire lifetime in those few minutes on stage. After a while, she walked toward the backstage curtain to watch the rest of the performances. She didn't want to sit alone anymore. Something inside her had opened, and now she wanted to see the world with new eyes. The guitar boy played beautifully. A group of dancers performed with remarkable energy. A comedian made the crowd laugh so hard that even the backstage crew chuckled. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like an outsider watching all of them. She felt like she was part of something. When the show ended, the host returned to the stage with a list in his hand. It was time to announce the top 3 performers of the night. Lena felt a familiar wave of nerves creeping in again, but this time it was lighter. Like a shadow she had learned to walk beside, the host cleared his throat. In 3rd place, he announced a young dancer. People clapped loudly. The girl ran up to the stage with a big smile. 2nd place, he called a boy who had done magic tricks earlier. More applause, and in 1st place, the host paused dramatically, scanning the list. Lena felt her chest tighten. She wasn't expecting to win. She wasn't even hoping for it. Her only wish had been to sing honestly, but the silence before the announcement felt heavy. The winner of tonight's talent night is the singer who moved us all. Lena froze. She didn't hear applause. She didn't hear cheers. She didn't hear anything for a moment. She only heard her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. People were clapping. Some were cheering. Some were looking at her with pure surprise, as if they couldn't believe the same quiet girl from rehearsal had just won. The dancer with glitter in her hair was smiling widely, clapping with genuine happiness. The guitar boy nodded at her proudly. Someone backstage nudged her gently. "Go," they whispered. "That's you." Lena's feet moved before her mind caught up. Walking onto the stage again felt surreal. The lights didn't blind her this time. They felt warm, welcoming. When she reached the center of the stage, the host handed her a small trophy and a certificate. "Congratulations," he said with a smile. "You earned it." Lena stared at the trophy in her hands. She didn't know what to say, so she simply bowed her head gratefully. The applause continued for a few more seconds before fading softly. After the show ended, people began leaving the hall. Families gathered their belongings. Children hugged their parents. Performers exchanged congratulatory words, but Lena wasn't looking for any of that. She scanned the crowd until she found her mother. Slowly making her way down the aisle with the help of a walking stick, Lena rushed to her. Her mother's eyes were filled with tears, not the sad kind, but the kind that come when the heart overflows. "You did it," her mother whispered, her voice trembling. Lena placed the trophy gently in her mother's hands. "This is for you," she said. "You never stopped believing in me." Her mother shook her head. "No, this is yours. You earned it." "I just watched." Lena hugged her tightly. She could feel her mother's frail arms around her, holding her with all the strength she had. They stayed like that for a long moment, just a people who had been through pain, loss, and quiet struggles, now holding a piece of joy together after walking her mother to the exit. Lena stepped outside the hall and breathed in the cool night air. It tasted different now, fresher, softer. The streetlights glowed warmly. The laughter of families drifted through the air. A child ran past her, still wearing the costume from their performance. Everything felt new. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. She walked home with her mother slowly. Her mother held the trophy carefully in her hands as if it were made of something fragile and precious. Lena didn't talk much on the way. She didn't need to. Her heart was full. When they reached home, her mother placed the trophy on the small table beside the window. The same window she always sat beside. The same window she used to stare out of quietly now. Something bright stood there, a reminder. A symbol. Lena sat down next to her mother. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable, peaceful. Later that night, after her mother went to sleep, Lena sat with her old keyboard again. She placed her fingers on the worn-out keys and smiled. She didn't play anything right away. She just breathed. There was no fear now. No faint voice inside telling her she wasn't good enough. Instead, there was a calm certainty. She could do this. She could sing. She could grow. She could shine in her own. It's a quiet way. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. She pressed a key softly. A single note filled the room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't flawless, but it was real. Just like her, she stepped onto the stage as if she was stepping into a cold river. Slowly, carefully, hoping no one would notice how much she was shaking inside. The lights felt too bright, sharper than she imagined during her late-night practices. Her only comfort was the quiet weight of the small mic stand in front of her. It grounded her, even though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted it. The hall was full now. The sound of whispers floated all around like tiny insects. People were settling in their seats, some chewing snacks, others scrolling through their phones. A few were already glancing at her with the same unkind curiosity she had felt during rehearsal. The look people give when they already expect someone to fail. She tried not to think about it. She tried not to think about how her knees felt weak, or how her breath seemed stuck in her chest. She reminded herself that she had survived things much harder than a room full of strangers. She had survived long nights caring for her mother, endless shifts at the shop, cold winters with a heater that barely worked, and the heavy silence of losing her father. This stage was nothing compared to those moments. Still, it felt huge. The host announced her name in a tone that sounded almost rushed, as if they didn't expect much. Some people barely looked up. She took a small breath as she reached for the mic. The first note was waiting inside her like a tiny flame, but she was scared to let it out. Her eyes scanned the room quickly. She could tell who was pretending to be polite, who was expecting entertainment, and who was waiting to laugh. A group of teenagers sat in the middle row, leaning into each other, whispering and giggling as they stared at her simple dress. A man in the front row arched an eyebrow as if he was already bored. Even one of the judges had their arms folded. She pressed her lips together. She had always been the kind of person people overlooked, too quiet, too soft-spoken, too busy with life to dress fancy or speak loudly. But today she wanted to be more than someone people pitied or ignored. Her fingers brushed the side of the mic stand, and she closed her eyes. She remembered her father's laugh, her mother's gentle voice telling her to try, and the nights she sat alone at the old keyboard, believing music was the only place where she felt whole. So she started. The first note came out thin, almost too soft. A few people leaned forward, trying to hear. For a second her voice wavered, and she felt the sting of panic. But something inside her pushed back, a kind of quiet strength that had lived in her all these years. She breathed again, and the next notes came stronger. Her voice began to fill the room slowly, like sunlight rising over a quiet street. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was warm, steady, and honest. The whispers in the room started to fade. The giggles stopped. Even the teenagers who had been joking earlier looked up. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't need to. Her song held pieces of her life inside it, pieces she never shared with anyone. The long nights, the lost parent, the heavy loneliness, the small hopes she kept alive only through music. Every note carried something real. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw the room differently. People were no longer staring at her clothes or her shy posture. They were listening. Really listening. A woman in the third row pressed a hand over her mouth. A man who had seemed bored before now sat still, his expression softening. Even the judge with folded arms slowly sat up straighter. Her confidence grew with each line. The song rose, carrying with it everything she had kept hidden for so long. Her voice trembled only at the emotional moments, but she didn't mind it. It made the performance real as the high note came. She took the deepest breath she had taken all evening and let it out with all the heart she had. The sound echoed across the hall, clear and bright, and for a moment the whole room felt still. No whispers. No laughs. No judgments. Only silence. The kind that comes when people feel something they didn't expect. When the final note faded, the hall remained quiet for a heartbeat longer. She lowered her eyes, unsure of what they would think. She had given everything she had in that song. She wasn't sure if it was enough. Then she heard it. A soft clap, then another. Then the entire hall erupted into applause that seemed to shake the walls. People stood up, cheering, clapping, wiping their eyes. A few of them had tears running down their cheeks. Even the teenagers were shouting in excitement, their earlier jokes forgotten. She felt her throat tighten, but it wasn't fear this time. It was relief. It was pride. It was the sudden and overwhelming realization that people weren't seeing a joke anymore. They were seeing her heart, her story, her courage. One of the judges actually stood up and clapped, something she hadn't seen them do for anyone else that night. The host looked stunned. The same people who had mistaken her for someone out of place were now cheering as if they had discovered a hidden star. She stepped back from the mic, unsure how to react. She wanted to smile, cry, or run backstage and breathe. Instead, she gave a small nod, her hands shaking again, but for a different reason. As she walked off the stage, people reached out to her, telling her how beautiful the song was, how moved they felt, how they hadn't expected it. Their faces were warm now, not mocking or dismissive. For once, she felt seen. Behind the stage curtain, she leaned against the wall and let out a shaky breath. It felt like the world had shifted slightly, as if a door she never thought she could open was now standing wide in front of her. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing clearly: she would no longer let doubt hold her back. She had something inside her that people needed to hear, and tonight proved it. She stood behind the curtain for a long moment, trying to calm the storm inside her chest. Even though the applause had already faded, the sound of it still echoed in her ears like a heartbeat she didn't know she had. Her hands were still trembling. But now it felt like the kind of trembling that comes after climbing something high. Something you once believed you could never reach. Someone called her name softly. She opened her eyes and saw one of the stage assistants smiling at her with genuine warmth. It felt strange to be looked at that way. Moments earlier, everyone had been unsure of her, maybe even expecting her to fail. But now the energy around her felt different, lighter, almost protective. "You did amazing," the assistant said, almost whispering as if afraid to break the moment. She nodded slowly, still unable to find words. When she finally stepped out from behind the curtain, the hallway backstage was filled with people, performers, helpers, organizers, all staring at her with new eyes. They didn't move toward her all at once. Some stepped back, unsure of what to say, while others approached with shy smiles. It was as if they were all still processing what they had. Witness, the first person who reached her, was a young performer who had been practicing an upbeat dance earlier. He looked nervous as he stood in front of her. I'm sorry if I ever seemed rude earlier," he said quietly. "Your performance was different, in a good way." "Really good," she gave a small nod. She didn't feel angry at anyone. She was too overwhelmed for that. Soon more people gathered around her. A woman who had been rehearsing a comedy act earlier held her hand and said she had cried during the last part of the song. Another performer said her voice reminded them of something they had been missing for years, a feeling, a memory, a kind of honesty they rarely heard. She listened to them all, feeling a warmth inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. The host approached her next, still looking shocked. He wasn't wearing the confident smile he had earlier. Instead, he looked almost embarrassed. "I think we weren't prepared for that," he admitted. "You changed the whole mood of the night." She didn't know what to say, so she simply smiled in a small, grateful way. Then one of the judges stepped forward. He was a serious-looking man with a calm face, someone she had noticed earlier leaning back in his chair as if bored. But now he looked thoughtful, even moved. He took a slow breath before speaking. "That was one of the most real performances we've had on this stage," he said. "You didn't try to show off. You just told the truth, and people felt it." Her eyes softened. She didn't sing for praise. She sang because she needed to. But hearing those words felt like a door inside her opening. The judge glanced around and lowered his voice slightly. "I want to talk to you after the event," he said. "There's something I'd like to offer you. Something bigger. If you're interested." She nodded again, unsure if she was dreaming. The rest of the night passed in a swirl of emotions. She stayed backstage, watching the remaining performers from the side. Some were talented, some were still learning, and some were nervous. But she watched them differently now. She understood what it felt like to stand on that stage with shaking hands and a heart full of fear. When the event was finally over, and the hall started to empty, she slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The night air was cool and soft, brushing against her skin in a comforting way. She let her shoulders relax and took a deep breath. It felt like the first real breath she had taken all night. She looked up at the sky. The stars were faint, but enough to make her feel small in a beautiful way. Everything felt unreal. The applause, the tears in the audience, the judge's words, the looks of admiration from people who barely noticed her earlier. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with shaky hands. It was her mother. She answered quickly, trying to sound calm. "I finished," she said quietly. Her mother's voice was soft but excited. "How did it go?" For a moment she couldn't speak. Emotions rushed up in her throat. She felt like a child again, calling home after something big happened. "It went well," she finally said. "Really well?" Her mother let out a long breath. "I knew you could do it," she said. "Your father would be so proud." Hearing that made her eyes sting. She turned her face away from the streetlight so no one passing by would see her tears. They talked for a few more minutes. Nothing dramatic. Just gentle words that filled her heart with a warm ache. When she hung up, she felt steadier. She went back inside once she was ready. The judge was waiting near the seating area, talking to one of the organizers. When he noticed her, he motioned for her to come closer. "I don't want to overwhelm you," he said, "but I'd like to invite you to perform at another event next month. It's a bigger stage. More people. I think your voice deserves to be heard." She blinked, unsure if she had understood correctly. "You mean, you want me to sing again?" "Yes," he said. "If you're willing." She hesitated only for a second before nodding. A quiet confidence was blooming inside her, something gentle but strong. The judge gave her a warm smile. "Good. I look forward to hearing you again." The rest of the night was calm. People slowly packed up equipment, and performers hugged their families. She walked around quietly, feeling like she was seeing the place for the first time. Everything looked the same, the stage, the lights, the seats, but she felt different. When it was time to leave, she stepped out into the night once more, holding her small bag tightly in one hand. She waited for the bus, standing under the soft glow of the streetlight. Her world wasn't suddenly perfect. She still had responsibilities, bills, worries, and a life filled with challenges. But now she also had something else, proof. Proof that she wasn't invisible. Proof that her voice mattered. Proof that she could stand on a stage and change the way people felt. When the bus finally arrived, she stepped inside and sat by the window. As the bus moved, she watched the city lights pass by, each one reflecting softly against the glass. She rested her head against the window and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. Not a wild dream of fame or fortune, just a simple dream. A future where she could sing without fear, where people listened, not because she looked impressive or dressed perfectly, but because she carried something real in her voice. A future where she wasn't underestimated or doubted. A future where she continued to grow, to try, to step onto stages that once terrified her. A future where she finally believed in herself the way her father once believed in her. The bus rolled on, and she opened her eyes one more time. The city felt big, but not as frightening as before. She felt small, but not unnoticed. She touched her throat gently, as if feeling the echo of the last note she had sung, and then, with a small smile rising on her lips, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning."